Hello. Now, a while back, I put a challenge out for ministers to answer a few questions that I had. And so far, I've had not had any takers. So I'm going to go ahead and discuss the story of David for y'all. So let's go over the situation of King David today. First, we will discuss why David remained a man after God's own heart. We will go into the subject of free will first. When God gave us free will, He gave us the option of loving and serving Him or not. Disobedience is just a side effect that happens with us being given the free will. God knew and understands this, but he wanted to make sure that our choice would ultimately lead us to Him. So when David sinned, he was disobedient, but God didn't judge David on his disobedience, only on his sins. Disobedience is not a major criterion to God because He knows that that is going to happen with us having our free will. Now, the reason that David remained a man after God's own heart can be found in his declaration of David being that. He said that David is a man after my own heart. He will do what I want. Now, does this last part, the last part of this sentence mean that David will be obedient to God? Definitely not. God understands the amount of enticement and temptations that we are subjected to continuously. Uh, Now, two things are at play here. The first is that even though God punished David, he knew that God will not stop loving him or forsake him because of his error. God punishes people, but then he no longer remembers the sin that he punishes people for. He says that he will no longer bring them into remembrance, which is a very good thing. Um, uh, have y'all ever forgiven someone and find out that every time that you remember their transgression, you become angry again and have to forgive them all over? It's like a circular thing, again and again. This process happens until the memory of that transgression becomes faded and less clear. With God, it is immediate. After He punishes you or forgives you, he no longer brings that transgression into his remembrance. Uh, Back to David. The second part is that David will do what God wants, and what does God want from us? Um, just a hint: it is not blind obedience. He wants compassion, love, tolerance, forgiveness, and justice, and most of all, works. Um, because if we are compassionate, love others, forgive others, and believe in equality or equity, but do not do anything to help people in poor circumstances, then we have not accomplished anything. We have all that in our heart, but yet haven't done anything. It's death. It is worthless. It's worthless to God. It's all dead works. Okay, God knew that even after David was punished, he would still love God and remain righteous in being a caring, compassionate, forgiving, tolerant, and justful man. So now let's go into the sin as well. How the sin happened was that through Satan's temptation, which we often fall prey to. The beginning starts with David seeing Bathsheba bathing on the roof. Now, while this is my own interpretation, the Bible doesn't really define it. I will say that David first glimpsed her and turned his sight away as a righteous man of that time would have, to not see her nakedness. But then Satan goaded him into looking again. She was very beautiful, and there's no harm in just looking, and you're not actually doing anything more, which is how Satan starts out, very subtle, thinking you're not really making a big step there. Now, once he looked again, then Satan knew that he had him. He had him. So then he followed up with, look how beautiful she is. Can you imagine what it would be like to be in her arms? Imagine how it would feel to embrace her and have sex with her. Once those ideas and images start going through a person's mind, then desire takes over, which is one of the weaknesses of the flesh. Um, to be pleasured, to have comfort, to have joy. Um, so then David had the desire to make his imaginations a reality. And since he was king, it was easy for him to make it happen. People underestimate the amount of pressure a powerful person in a powerful position can exert over other people. Anyway, the first sin was looking at her nakedness, which convinced him to go ahead and go further by fantasizing more. The next sin was being lustful and having a desire for her. The next sin was consciously choosing to commit adultery. And he at this point knew that he was married, that she was married. Next, the actual commission of adultery. At this point, Satan knew that he had him hooked and could get him to commit worse sins from this point. Do y'all know that God is not the only one that can put babies in the womb? So can Satan. And people are misinformed about it, especially Christians, thinking that only God can put babies in the womb. No, Satan is equally as equipped to do that. So after the adultery, Satan made sure to put a baby in Bathsheba. On finding out about the pregnancy, David panicked and tried to figure out a way to hide his sin from everyone, which is another tactic that Satan uses. This is where Satan will use guilt, shame, and regret in order to get more sins out of someone, and especially he got this out of David. One of the biggest tools that Satan uses against us is shame and guilt. In trying to hide his shame and guilt, David decided to try to hide his guilt by having her husband brought home from the battlefield in order for him to have sex with her and then blame the pregnancy on him. Now, at this point, the husband was more righteous than David in that he refused to even go home to be with his wife while his men were in battle. David even tried to use pressure and temptation on him to get to do the unrighteous act, but he remained stern and refused to the king himself. This was another sin by David, using the tool of the devil in order to hide his sin. Now, the next sin was having the husband sent back to the battlefield with a note for the general to place him in the most dangerous position so that he would be killed. He delivered his own murder orders. This was David guilty of murder at this point. After the husband's death, David took Bathsheba to his wife, either from desire for her or still wanted to hide his guilt, or both. Now, the baby no longer being a need for Satan, the baby was not going to live. So no matter how much David fasted and prayed to God, the baby would not be allowed on earth. So David was punished greatly by the death of the child that he wanted greatly, and by the actions that followed his own family, which further punished him. Now you will notice that God took away that unrighteous baby from David, but then he allowed Bathsheba to get pregnant again. And what was the result of Bathsheba's second pregnancy? It was the birth of Solomon. So God corrected a great evil, a great wrong, by substituting it with a better good, a new good, a better, gooder thing that he did. I'm sorry, I'm running out of words. Okay, that's all I have. Y'all have a good night. Bye. God bless you.